My mic mute. Oh, okay. Welcome to another edition of Swerve with me. This is a show where we have adult conversations for mature audiences only. We talk to people who have overcome challenges and they're not afraid to show their scars and to speak their truth. We talk to real people. We talk to people with experience, and we talk to people who are on a mission to help others succeed. And so tonight I am so excited about our conversation that's coming up. As you join us, tag somebody, let them know Swerve is back on, and we're having another meaningful conversation tonight. I want to introduce to you my guest tonight, Lauren Aubrey. Lauren hails from Cat Island. She's the youngest person that I know from Cat Island, actually, because when you think of Cat Island, you usually think of older people. I don't know why that's so stereotypical, but born in Cat Island, moved to New Providence very early in her life, and then subsequently to Grand Bahama, where she resides right now. But hers is a story that has had so many peaks and valleys. But for me, when I first heard her story a few weeks ago on another program where she was testifying, I knew for sure that she was the type of person that I wanted to have a conversation with, because there were some questions in particular that I would want to ask her pertaining to her life, her experiences, and how she has been able to overcome so much at such a young age. She's in her 30s, she's a wife, she's a mother, she's an entrepreneur, she's a master baker, self taught, and there are just so many things to her credit that we're going to discuss tonight. But help me welcome to the platform tonight, ladies and gentlemen, our guest, Lauren Adley. Good evening. Sorry, Aubrey. Good evening.
Good
How are you?
evening. I'm all right.
I think I'm hearing some kind of feedback again. But guys, as you listen, let me know.
Let me just check it again. Let me check the audio. Yes, I still have the cancellation on.
Okay, so let me know as you tune in if you can hear some feedback, guys. So, all right, let's get down and let's begin to talk. Like I said, you were born and raised in Cat Island, and you experienced the whole point of the show tonight is to talk about trauma and how you
Yes,
were able to deal with various traumas in your life and to become this strong spiritual woman that you are today, a work in progress like all of us, but nevertheless more than a conqueror, having gone through so much. So let's talk a little bit about your life as a young girl. What was life like?
um, life was basically, well, yeah, like what these children used to now. You would be more so outdoors, but growing up on the island, you tend to be more with older people. And so for them, it's more so of, okay, we can teach you how to cook, we can teach you how to bake, we can teach you how to farm, we can teach you how to basically live on the island. And so a lot of it was more so just basically learning how to take care of yourself on the island. Um, so most of the younger time, I spent a lot of that time with my grandmother. Um, they usually tend to send you back to the island every break. So that's Christmas break, summer break, Easter break, any break, you back on the island. And so that's what growing up was for me on the island.
So very early, you had your first traumatic experience when you were still just a male, what, 5, 6 years old in primary school. Tell us a little bit about what happened to you.
Um, the first set of things that happened to me more so when I was in Nassau. Um, I well, at that time, my mother, as she worked, as you know, a lot of times persons, when they work, they tend to leave their child with whoever is able to watch them or whoever is able to just help out. And so for her, she used to just leave me with a family member. And so when I would be there, um, I had two family members at the time that basically they took advantage of me being there. Whenever I would go there, it would always be something. Um, whether it's them touching me or having me touch them or whatever it is that they said to do. Um, because at that time with them, it was more so you are scared because they're telling you, okay, well, I'll kill you or I'll kill your mother if you ever decided to tell her. Like, we can kill all of you. And so for me, it was more of a, okay, let me, you saying, okay, I'm protecting her by not saying anything. And I'll just take this, but at least they wouldn't harm her. And so at that age, that's the decision that, you know, for you don't know no better. So that's the decision you're making. And you're not deciding to say because you're still in fear.
That was a lot of pressure on a young girl. Thinking back, reflecting, if you can, how did that impact your childhood? Like, did that make you a rowdy, having always to argumentative, wanting always to defend yourself type of child, or did it make you a shy, introverted type of child? One minute,
I
sorry.
became
Okay, go ahead.
more so I was talkative. Um, and so a lot of times person's like, oh, she just don't shut up. And so for me, that was my outlet, just trying to keep it like normal, you know. And so a lot of times I would just talk. So I was just really talkative. I never was, well, at some point, it was more so I just like to read. And so it wouldn't have been unusual to find me away reading. So for me, it was if I'm in front of persons or if I'm around persons, I'm talking, 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 talking. But when I'm to myself, I am just reading.
So your dog sure having a good time in the back there. So once so you were very talkative and people didn't understand. That was just a way of you being expressive. Nobody really understanding what you were experiencing. Your next opportunity, or not your opportunity, but the next time that you were molested through primary school, you would have already moved into now Grand Bahama. And did you understand that? Did you even understand at that early age what was happening to you?
I understood. Um, because the truth is, most young girls, well, I can't say most, but um, for the most part, you would hear your mother say, "Okay, but don't let no one touch you here," or so you know that if someone is touching you there, you know it's something is off. So you kind of sort of had that idea that this was wrong simply because you are threatening me, and so if you're threatening me, it's clear that this isn't something that I should talk about.
So after experiencing some family members at some point began to molest you, and uh, you shared a story with me about these young men who, I don't know if you ever told anybody, but your grandmother said something to them because they were acting out. So tell us that story about your grandmother and these young men who were molesting you.
At that time, we again we used in Nassau. Um, I had these two family members. Of course, they was very expressive, and they didn't care if it was an adult or who it was, whether it was an elder or not. And so I remember that specific day. Um, they would have been, they just was cursing my cursed my Grammy out. And I remember my Grammy said that day, she said, "Y'all ain't gonna make it to see the end of this year." That's what she told them. And within that same day, there was an incident. Um, that was one of the days when they almost got caught too. Um, but they hurry up, move, and the person opened the door. So They didn't get catch. And when we went out front, because I was told to let's go. And so when we went out front, my Grammy was saying something to them. And it got into this back and forth, and it was, I can't repeat some of them things to my Grammy, but after that, like literally days later, they died. Both died.
And you said they died and it was Christmas Day, right?
Yes, they died on
That
Christmas Day.
that is absolutely amazing. Did that cause you any trauma?
For me, to be honest, I think that was one of the happiest days in my life, if I could be honest. Because something happened to you. Nobody knows, but you're relieved because okay, they died, so it's not going to happen again. Well, so I thought.
Oh, how old were you at that point when they died?
Um, I know I was about to go into primary school, so I was fairly young. We'll just say I'll say five. I was about five or so.
So, I mean, your early childhood started off very, very
Yeah.
traumatic, and then you moved throughout primary school. Now, throughout your primary school education, were there still people that were molesting you as you grew?
I had a next time that it would have happened. I was in the early part of primary school. I think I was in about third grade or fourth grade, one of them. But it was definitely when I was in primary school. Um,
For some reason, we're experiencing some delays. Um, I don't
there
know if
was
you
a
can.
few incidents.
Okay, there's a slight delay, Lauren,
It
but
happened.
go ahead and talk. We
It
can
happened.
hear you.
They're not really checked. Yes. So, um, yes. So it would happen like late in the nights. It happened whereas it was actually a sibling. And so a lot of times it was more of let's play mommy and daddy. Um, and it was like, okay, it was as if I was a how do you do that? They had to tell you it, and so you are now basically experimenting with me. And for me, I would always keep quiet, but it did affect me because there were times when I would pee up myself. I would just pee up myself, like no reason, just pee up myself. And eventually it got to the point where um it stopped. I don't know, perhaps maybe he found out that it wasn't right because like I said, the two of us was basically young. So and so eventually it did stop.
All right. I don't know what's happening tonight, but please bear with us. So, once again, you're experiencing this consistent trauma in your life. It seems like you can't get a break, and you're constantly and repeatedly being molested by different people at various points in your life. So, let's move on now to junior high. How did that, rather, let's go back to being in school, period, experiencing being molested and not being able to share it anyone. How did that impact your grades, or did you have at least one confidant that you shared something with at some point?
Yes, I had a confidant. She's deceased now. It's my cousin. She died probably last year. I can't remember, but she died. Um, in school, it didn't affect my grades. I was very smart. I was extremely smart. I was a top A student. It never affected my grade. The only things that my teachers would always have on like my report card is, oh, she's very talkative. She's very talkative. She's always talking. And so that was always on my report cards.
All right. So you said you had at least one confidant. What was some of the things that you would share with your
I
cousin?
can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Because I don't know what's happening. So you said you had at least one confidant that you would talk to your cousin when you shared to her what was happening to you. What were some of the things that she would say to you?
um, she shared similar stories. She shared similar stuff with me. Um, and a lot of times, well, everyone has that one cousin where they talk about everything. And so everything was what happened within family, um, things we overheard, or just basically things that we saw. It was always me and her talking. And
All
she
right.
never
So,
shared what
and she never told anybody about what was happening with her. And so that was a pact between the two of you.
yes.
Okay. So let's talk about going through high school. What was junior high like? Were you having similar experiences, or this whole bit of molestation just stopped?
It stopped, and then in junior high, grades, but it was more so I started like lashing out. You couldn't say the wrong thing to me because I was sure to answer you back. And if I had to fight you, we was gonna just fight. Um, and so for me, um, a lot of times, like on and off, I would be in altercations.
And
And then
let me tell you what to let me tell you what to do because I'm constantly getting this delay. So why don't you come out and then sign back in, and let's see if that's going to help to clear it up a little bit.
one point,
So sign out. So come out and then come back in.
I was pulled out of the public school that I was.
Did Did you hear me, Lorraine? I want you to come out, log out, and then log back in. Let's see if that's going to clear it up a little bit. Okay? Can you hear me? Okay. Having a little technical difficulties. Just bear with me a little bit. I believe she's going to be back momentarily. But if you're just joining me, welcome to Swerve with me. I'm talking to Lauren Albury, and we're talking about trauma, the various traumas that she's experienced during the course of her life. She's in her 30s, and for her, the trauma began as early as the age of 5 with someone known to her molesting her, started fondling and talking with her. I mean, fondling her and no penetration but fondling at the time, and she experienced it pretty much through primary school for a minute and then it stopped. And so we're going to pick up the conversation now she's back, and let's see if this audio is a bit clearer. Okay, welcome back. hopefully we can hear you a bit better now. So let me just kill your mic for a moment. So let's pick up the conversation, Loren, because you said through primary school it stopped, and then in junior high school it started. You started acting out, and you said you were like ready to fight at any moment and all that stuff. So let's talk about any trauma that you may have experienced in junior high school.
Okay. Um, and yeah, in junior high school, I think the change came also when, you think that things are going okay and things are going fine. And then it's like you experience this trauma all over again. You thought that, okay, this chapter, this page in your life is now ended, but here comes your uncle trying to do it again. Um, and so I'm in junior high school now, and I remember that my mom, she used to allow me to go and say, okay, let's you go clean that house or whatever. And so I would go and clean his house. And there was this particular Saturday that I went to clean the house, and he literally held me and began to like try to kiss me. And in him trying to kiss me, he like literally was trying to like force me down. And I remember I fought back and I ran out of the house. Um, and when I ran out of that house, I like disassociated myself with him. Um, I didn't bother to I just didn't bother to interact with him anymore. If they would say, okay, we're going there, I would always opt to stay home. Um, and so for me, that was my way of just avoiding that whole situation. I never told anyone about that account. I told my cousin, but to say anyone else, I never bothered to tell them. For me, it was the fair that he was in. He held a government position. It was a very well recognized position, and so you know, you, there's always that fear to say, okay, you're the one now putting this out there, and not only are you putting it out there, there's this chance to say now, well, this is this troubled child now, and they may not just believe me. And so for me, I just left it as that. I just always avoid it. And so it started to reflect now because, you have this bottled up. You're not talking about it. And so persons see you reacting and they don't understand now that you're now fighting, but you're fighting and you're talking back and you're doing all of this. They see that as okay, well, she's just being a teenager because that's just a phase, but nobody is taking into consideration that this is something else to withdraw more. You can hear me now? I'm not sure.
So you talked about you were frozen for a minute. So you were talking about this whole thing of your uncle attempting and you got away. And at this point you're still not saying anything to anyone into your family in anyone in your family about what you're experiencing, but you're starting to act out and nobody knows why. Were you or did you become promiscuous after all of these people had been over a period of time molesting you? Did at any point you become promiscuous yourself? Okay, this I don't really understand what's happening tonight. She's frozen again. So Lorraine, let's try this one more time for you to go out and then come back in. I don't understand what's happening, but somebody must not want you to share your story. So let's go out and come back in. I don't know what's going on with our internet connection, but once again, welcome to Swerve, talking with Lorraine Albury about her experiences with trauma and at the different phases of her life. And trust me, her story hasn't even really started yet. And we're experiencing these difficulties at the moment. So I'm waiting for her to come back in and let's see what happens. Okay, now we're back again. So let's talk about what your teen years were like, Lorraine, through high school. And I was asking, did at any point you become promiscuous because other people um, had been molesting you over the years, or were you able to just control yourself whenever you had the chance? How did you handle this as a teenager?
Say, well, if you ever do this, I'll stitch you, you know what up. Or um, if you do this, I will walk in your, you know what. And so for me, it was more things happen. I was more so scared. And then I had this moment where um, I was in high school, and the principal at that time, when I was in the public school, I began to hang out with the wrong set of people. Um, and they were having sex and they was doing whatever they wanted to do. And so at that time, the principal would have called my mother to say, well, okay, I believe that your daughter is having sex. Um, and I remembered one evening I came from school and I was taken to the gynecologist right away. Um, and she was like, okay, well, we can see today what you're doing. Um, and so we did the exam. Everything was fine. And so for me, I was just more scared because um, I was more scared because, now she's randomly doing this. And so for the junior high school, I just didn't do anything. But when I got in grade 10, um, I began to just entertain boys. Um, I would be caught up now. I still didn't lose focus in school because for me, I couldn't I couldn't get bad grades because that was that was a punishment.
Okay, let's do this again. Do y'all who know how to pray, pray, because the enemy is really fighting hard.
I don't
So we're gonna do this one more time and try. If not, I'm gonna have to invite her back again so we can just get a better flow to really understand her story, because we're trying to really get her to share her story, and there's victory at the end of this story. And that's what I really want you all to really hear, that despite all that she would have experienced throughout the course of her life to date, there is definitely victory. Okay, so somebody is telling me try it without the video, but I don't want to do that.
Okay.
Okay, if I have to invite you back again, we'll have to do that because I really want to have people to hear the victory side of your story. So let's talk
Yes.
about what happened in high school. Um, getting pregnant in high school and what happened as a result of that.
Um, so I did end up losing my virginity. And end up getting pregnant all at the same time. And so for me, I didn't really know. Um, and so I would always be asked, okay, what day did your period come? And me, I wasn't really thinking about it much until it was more obvious. Okay, well, your period is not coming. Your period isn't coming. Um, Went to the doctor, same gynecologist again. And the gynecologist was like, okay, she's pregnant. Um, and so for me, it was more of a, okay, what do I do now? Um, and then it wasn't a decision for me. It was a decision made. I was taken to a doctor where they basically performed an abortion. The first attempt failed, and happened again.
Okay, just 1 minute, Lorraine. You said you ended up pregnant. I believe you were 15 at the time in high school, and a decision was made that you would have an abortion, obviously by your parents or guardian. And you went and you said the first attempt failed. But what I want to understand, because I've never had an abortion, and I want to know what what did they do? Like, did they give you a pill or did they give you something to drink? Like, do you remember what actually happened? Like, what did they do?
Get it. He gave me a pill to drink, and he inserted two pills. Um, I wouldn't forget the account because even when he was inserting the pills, he began to fondle me. He literally, and for me, it was like, okay, I don't think your fingers should be going in and out so much. Like this, it doesn't feel like you're just putting the pills there. So even with that situation, that was the next thing that just was like, wow. Um, I didn't really, that wasn't something that I mentioned. But again, that first time it didn't, nothing happened. I was supposedly supposed to just bleed, but it didn't happen. And so to him, because when I went to the gynecologist and they test, they still could see that I was pregnant. And so they took me back to this doctor again. And when I went back to the doctor, he would have proceeded to do the same thing again. He would have said, you've quicker than I did leave the first time. And so I waited there a bit longer on the table.
Let me make sure I'm clear on what you're saying. So you went to the doctor the first time. He gave you something to take orally, and then he inserted some pills into you, and he was fondling you. Whatever that procedure was supposed to do, it didn't work. And so you went back to the gynecologist, another doctor. You were still pregnant. And so then they took you back to the same doctor again who had fondled you the first time to do the procedure all over again. So what what happened the second time?
Again. Um, he gave me the pills. Like I said, the second time he inserted more tablets this time. He proceeded to do the same thing, but this time I asked him, I said, "What are you doing?" And he stopped. He tried to play it off, and he was like, "Well, he was just making sure I'd get up far. He got it up far enough." Um, and then he left.
This, Lauren, we're going to definitely have to do this again because for some reason this reception is really delayed in overkill. But let me ask you this: the second time around, how long did it take before you realized something was happening with your body? Did you have a question?
I can't hear.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can't hear you.
I don't know what's happening. Can you hear me now? Can anybody hear me? Okay, audience, I don't know if you're still out there. If you can hear me, she's gone out again to try this one more time. I really do apologize, but hey, this is beyond our control. Definitely a technical issue. Let's try this again, see what happens. Okay, so I was asking, did you hear the last question? I was asking, how long was it before you something started happening in your body after the second attempt by the doctor to abort your fetus?
Probably took about 2 days before I started really noticing. It was really, really bad. I'd already traveled and all. And so it didn't happen until I was actually in Nassau, and it acted. I woke up with some terrible cramps. Like it was really bad, sweating so much. Like the pain was so much, like I was just dripping sweat. And I remember that I felt like I just needed to poop. And so I went to the bathroom. Nothing was coming out, but the cramps, they just kept coming. And it's like, um, it was going from far apart cramps to just at one point, it just started getting just intense. It was just like constant. It wasn't no break in the cramps. And so only when something fell out, um, I got like this relief. Um, and then the pain stopped.
Okay, so did you actually see the fetus?
Yes, I did.
Okay, how traumatic was that? Like, you see this fetus, you're only what, 15? So explain what is going on inside your little teenage mind.
When I when I ended up seeing it, it was more of a wow, this really happened. This is it. Um, for me, it was more of a. I ended up having a breakdown. Um, it was summer break at that time, And so I would have had to go back to school that September. And I went to a new school that September. I entered a new high school because, again, I told you they had pulled me out of public school and basically just pushed me into a private school. Um, and so in grade 10, I was still in new school, so you don't really you don't know much persons there. I had a cousin there, but she was a grade ahead of me, and so you're not seeing her unless it's like break or lunch. And I remember in grade 10, I think my very first week, um, it was like 5 or 6 girls. They Me and them were like closer. For them, they school level that
I think what I'm going to do is invite Lauren to come back next week because this week has really been a challenge, and I don't want to downplay your story in any way, and I want the audience to really be able to get the true flow of your story and what you've experienced. So I'm gonna invite you to come back again next week, Lauren, so we can continue the story because she keeps dropping in and out for some reason, and I don't want to in any way diminish her story. So, Lauren, let's do this again next week because the enemy. But let me tell you something.
okay.
This is an indication of how powerful your story obviously is because if he's fighting this hard for you to get the story, and it's not like you haven't shared before, but because I really want people to understand the mindset of someone so young, the trauma that you've experienced, and by extension, the work that you have put in to help to get yourself healthy and what you're doing to help others, and that's what I want people to experience and appreciate. So I'm gonna invite you back next week. Let's do this again. I'll reschedule who I had booked for then, but um let's see if while you're up now, if you could finish and tell us about how, because I really want to know at 15, how did an abortion impact you, or you just went on business as usual? Because I know you said you went to another school and you met a new group of friends. So if we can, just tell us about what that experience was like getting into this new school with this new group of friends.
Um, for me, like I said, after the breakdown, um, I think I kind of pulled myself together. I tried to be as normal as possible, but I still.
Okay, sorry, Lauren, 1 minute. You said you had a breakdown. 1 minute before you go on. You said you had a breakdown. Explain to us what when you say breakdown, what did that mean for you? What did that look like?
Okay, for me, at that age, I just wanted to die. Um, I I had enough. Um, I literally found myself just crying a lot. Um, I found myself like basically I became like a serial reader. Um, I would more so just keep reading because it kept me um, occupied. And then my reading turned into me reading more things about sex, more things about I would read like romance novels at that time. I used to read like Blaze books. And so for me, then I started watching certain
Let me just
things. And
ask
so
you
in
this
high
before you
school,
go on. Before you go on, Lauren. Um, you said you were reading a lot. Did at any point somebody decide at that age that after experiencing something like that you needed counseling? So was counseling involved in this process at any point?
no ma, no ma. Counseling was never mentioned at this time or was never offered. Of course, they send you to church, but even at that age, you're more so worried that if you talk, it's gonna be worse when you get home. At that time, at that young age, um, I knew all too well that what happened in the four walls need to stay in the four walls. That was always the rules. What you see, you don't see. What you hear, you don't hear. And so for me, I became this person I would hear, I would see, and I just would not say because the fear of just getting punished for actually talking.
So you mentioned about switching schools and meeting a new group of friends. Talk about that.
But with the new groups of friends, I guess because now when I came, and they just heard, I just basically, like I said, I had a breakdown. And so in the bathroom, just crying, I was just letting everything out, like things that just happened. I was just talking about it. And so from that point, like I said, we became really good friends. And so whatever problems they would have, they would talk. At one point, they considered our bathroom in that school, they used to say a meeting room. And so everybody knows that if you go in there and you see one of the girls in there, you know, okay, we need to find okay, we need to find one of them and talk to them. And so they was able to just talk. I've always been that person that can talk. That has always been the case. Persons come and they say, okay, well, I need to talk to you, Lord. And so in high school, a lot of them, they basically trusted me, I guess, because now they're saying, okay, well, you trusted us with such a big secret. And so we could talk to you. And so that was the type of relationship we had.
So, in your circle of friends at the time, were there other girls who would have had similar experiences as you that you all talked about in this meeting place at school?
Yes, I had other persons who would confide in me that a certain members of their family did something. In fact, I even had at one point I got cool with certain guys. I even had a guy who said, "Well, okay, my cousin raped me," um, and so you know I had that encounter where persons would actually tell me what was happening with them.
So, at 15, you're carrying all of this. You're just trying to cope with this trauma of having an abortion and still trying to having a breakdown and trying to carry on your life as an average teenager. What was the rest of high school like for you?
Um, High school for me, I always tried to keep busy. Um, for me, a lot of my because like I told you, I wasn't a dumb child, and so grade 10 and 11, I basically did all of my BGCSEs. So when I was in grade 12, it was just I just did Pittman exams in grade 12, and so I finished high school. Um, I started working in high school as well, and so also I started to like pick up a lot of different trades. I would go to BTVI to learn something here or learn something there. And so even started at one point I started GGYA. I started that a lot. So I would always go like camping or hiking. Um, and so I was always active. I was pretty active in high school because sometimes I would just keep me, sometimes you get so busy, you get busy, so you take your mind off what's actually happening.
So the rest of high school was pretty smooth for you after that particular experience, or did you have any more trauma during high school?
For me in high school, it was more so I just used to get beaten. That was about it for me. I got beaten a lot. I got beaten a lot. Um, whether it was for something I said, whether it was something someone told, just I answered her the wrong way. Um, so for me, keeping busy and staying out the house would mean, okay, well, I'm not gonna get those kind of beatings, you know. I had instances, and so it could be a problem. So for me, I always tried to keep whatever was happening to me like under wraps. So no one ever knew.
So even through high school, you still never told your mother what had happened. So you went straight through high school and never told your mother what had been happening to you from childhood. And at what period did you finally, if you have already told your mother, at what point did you tell her?
I ended up telling her um, July 2021. I ended up telling her um, the majority of what was going on with me. And it was more so because the things was consuming me. Um, everything was consuming me. I would have recently, in that March in 2021, I would have suffered a mini stroke. Um, I went to bed, and then when I woke up, it was like one side of my body just was numb. Um, my toes were like ice, my fingers were like ice, and so I got scared. I went to the doctor, and um, the doctor was like, "Well, what you're telling me, a lot of the signs and symptoms that you're telling me, they are signs for lupus." And so in that March, it was more of a okay, everything is like going downhill. You're getting really sick. You're harboring all of this bitterness. You're just it's just so much. And for me, it was like that was the point where I was like, okay, um, things aren't getting better. I would have started journaling. Tell you right now, I would have started officially journaling April 18th, 2021. And so a lot of the things, I think this was one of the first entries that I made when I began to talk about the lupus, and I began to basically start like expressing myself, like what was happening with me, what I was feeling. So I would have instances where I talk to persons, but even so, I became so overwhelmed. And I always tell persons with trauma, because you're not really talking about it, it has this really nasty um from April now. I began to go into June. Um, Again, it's not a journal entry. Um, when I went into June, as you can see
Before
down
you
there
go
where I
on,
was starting to basically.
before you go on, Lauren, I know we jumping ahead of the story a lot, but what I want to ask you is, what is it that caused you to begin journaling? Because you said a lot. Um, you mentioned that you had a mini stroke. You mentioned that you were diagnosed with lupus, and you're what, in your 30s. And so you're having a mini stroke in your 30s. You're diagnosed with lupus. That's heavy. So what was it that caused you to begin to journal in the first place, to release some of these thoughts that you were going? Because I'm still going to invite you next week, because even though we jumped ahead to this part of the story, I want to understand why you started journaling.
Sick. A lot of times I was just holding things. And because I began to like, I was just holding in, suppressing. Sometimes when people say, okay, you're sick, you try to find ways, okay, well, how can I beat this thing? And so in the research, just researching like how I could just beat this thing. A lot of my research was basically saying, okay, but there are to emotions as well. And if in a healing journey now, you would want to release whatever is bottled up, whatever you've been suppressing for all of the years. And so I said, okay, I used to journal, let me start again. And so in journaling now, I started to like get things out. Um, and I think I journaled up to June. Um, and it was still rough because I began to like recall things that I've just locked in the back of my mind and say, okay, well, if you don't think about it, then you don't have to deal with it. And that was a day I decided to just, I was saying that was it. I I was already in my room for about 4 or 5 days, locked away. Um, and I went to go and jump out of the second story window. Because I was like, you know what, I had enough. I already sick. Um, I don't really interact with my family as much. I don't really talk to much people. So for me, if I jump, worst case scenario, no one can miss me anyway. And so as I was about to jump, I heard the Lord, he was like, no, no. And so that day, I decided, okay, well, I was going to take some time off. And so a lot of persons, they knew that I closed my business. I decided to just say, okay, got to the point where I said, okay, I'm going to close my business. And I remember I went on a fast because now I'm saying, okay, I know that at this place, I definitely need help because I'm literally going to just jump at this point. I was going to jump. And so I know that for me to be there, I definitely needed help. And so I remember that on the fast, um, Facebook notifies you if somebody makes a post. And one of my friends happened to she happened to ask for therapists at that time. And when she would have asked for therapist, I me. And I remember I went there then the Lord was like, you gonna have this conversation tonight. And I still sought counseling. So on my first session, stigma that once you go to counseling, you're crazy. And so I think after my first session, I felt a lot better. Like I was relieved because now these are things that I've been just carrying. And at this point, I didn't have that cousin anymore because my cousin died. And so for me, my therapist now, I was just letting it out. I was just letting it out.
So you finally found this place with your therapist where you could just express yourself with no judgment, and be able to just talk about what you had experienced along the way. And we skipped over so much, but at this point now, what were some of the things that the therapist was saying to you that made you think, okay, I made the right decision to go to this particular therapist? All right, I don't know if you
I
heard the
can't
last
hear
question.
you.
Yeah, I don't know
I
what's
couldn't hear
happening.
you. I could see you, but I couldn't hear you.
Okay, so I
What
was
was the last
asking,
question?
what was some of the things that the therapist said to you that made? Okay, there she goes again, y'all. Wow, he really is having a fight tonight. Okay,
Some of the
we
things
really
that the
we really have to do this
therapist
again.
told
Go
me.
ahead.
Some of the things that the therapist told me, I know one of my first sessions, one of my first sessions with her, I told her that my problem was now that I feel how they make me feel or whatever it was. A lot of times persons would take what I say now and they make an assumption of what I'm trying to say, and it was always like this, defending myself. And one of the things that most my therapist you are what you say. She said whatever is perceived on their end, that is ultimately, she said, once you have clarified what you say and what they are perceiving, and this is what they're going on, she said, you can't beat up yourself about that. She said, you have to let that go. And so for me, it was letting go of a lot of things. And so then you would have a person say, oh, you care, like you don't care. Um, and so for me, I had to get to that place now where I would say, okay, that's how you feel. That's how you feel. But I'm not going to be going back and forth with you. I'm not going to argue about what I'm saying to you. Another thing was um, me basically caring what person thought about me. And even that was a struggle, because you share something and persons still go there and say what they want to say and do what they want to do. And that's the Bahamas, the place small, so you can hear it or you can see it again. And so for me, I had to get to the place where I had to like get over the opinions of persons, like literally stop caring about what persons said about me. um, and it got to the point, I mastered a lot because it got to the point where I would actually tell persons I don't want to hear what they say. And that used to offend persons because now you come into gossip, and I'm telling you, I don't care what they say. Whatever they say, that's your business. I used to get to the point where I told persons, whatever they discuss in their private time, don't come back and repeat it. And I realized that a lot of times we hinder our progress because we are more concerned about what others are saying about us. And where we are in this place where we just want to defend, we want to defend, we want to defend. And I remember one time the Holy Spirit was like, I've already told you what I said about you. And so what anyone else says, it really doesn't matter. Until I've changed that word about you, what they say don't matter. And so I had persons like even up to now, after they heard the first testimony and they was like, okay, well, I used to be thinking you was this way because they would always say this, but I never knew that it what you was going through. And so they was like, okay, well, this makes sense now to me. This makes sense why you would act this way or why you'd be so distant. And so for me, I got to the point too where my therapist was like, okay, now you have to get to the place where you don't make contact with person. And so, you're still trying to fit in. So even though these persons hurt you feel this need to still have boundaries. I started negative, you can't come in this way. Um,
Okay, there she goes again. I'm going to wrap this up as soon as she comes back in. I'm going to wrap it up. And I want to say thank you to those of you who've been hanging with us tonight. In spite of all of these technical difficulties, I will invite Lorraine back next week so that we can really hear her story and without any technical difficulties. But it's an indication, as I said earlier, that her testimony is so very powerful that the Prince of the Air is trying to do whatever he can to stop it from happening. But it shall be told, it shall be said. So I want to thank you for hanging with us tonight and for tuning into Swerve with me. This is a show for all of my swervers. You're here with me every week. For those of you who's just stopped by for the first time, welcome. Lorraine, we're going to wrap this up and then pick this up next week. But this is a show where we have adult conversations. We talk to people each week who've overcome challenges and they're not afraid to show their scars and to speak their truth. Atlanta, it's good to see you, Atlanta, in Inagua, and I see Turks and Caicos. I see Texas here, Nassau, Grand Bahama, to all of you. Um, Thanks for tuning in. I will be back again next week. We'll continue part two with Lauren so you can hear more of her incredible story because she mentioned so far you've heard about her being molested, you've heard about her being having an abortion, but you haven't heard about the false accusations where she was arrested. You haven't heard about the domestic violence. You haven't heard about how she turned around that lupus diagnosis, what she did to get herself back on track. And so there's just so much more to her story that I really want you to be able to hear because we do these shows each week because somebody's going to come along who may have a similar story like Lauren. I may be feeling helpless and hopeless at the time. And perhaps they'll come across this broadcast, this live stream, or another one where they can get some hope. And that's why we do what we do. Each week, I'm Miranda. I am a life transformation strategist, and I work with professional men and women. I help them to find their purpose, to build capacity, and then to develop a strategy so that they can create the life that they want and deserve. So that's why we do what we do. So thanks again to Loran for stopping by. We'll hear more from her next week. So make sure come back next week and then tag someone and let them know that we're going to hear another amazing story of someone who has overcome and is helping others to do the same. So thanks again for tuning in. I'm Miranda. Have a great week, everybody.